Hello, welcome to Video Mania 2. I'm the man behind the counter, Duncan, and today we're going to talk about Hard Target 2. Now hear me out, I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh great, a straight-to-video movie based off an action classic. We've seen it before, most recently with Eraser Reborn, which is based off the old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Eraser, and I watched that and it was terrible. It just recycled ideas and just changed some characters in a couple settings, but it was basically the same movie, only cheaper and not nearly as good. Now, Hard Target 2 is an exception to this rule. Usually when you have straight-to-video sequels, it's just cheaper, which this one is, but it's also just derivative and not very good. Here, is it as good as the original classic? Of course not. You know, you don't have Van Damme or John Woo involved this time, so and they don't have the budget either. But this movie does succeed on its own merits. And one thing that adds credibility immediately is Scott Adkins. And you have a great supporting cast too. You have Rona Mitra and Robert Knepper, and the rest of the cast does a good job too. Everybody has fun here. And it was directed by Roel Riney. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. And he makes a lot of lower budgeted action movies, but he's very good with it a lot of times. And here he used some drone shots, and the cinematography for a movie as small scale as this really works. And another thing I really like about Hard Target 2, instead of just being a rehash of the original on a smaller budget, just trying to cash in off that name, or somebody just kind of rents it and they're like, why did I do that? This movie establishes its own identity, and I really like that. So I'm going to dive further into it. And before I forget, if you like under-the-radar action movies, older action movies, or just movies in general, please give Video Mania 2 a like and subscribe. Okay, now, this movie here, when I first saw the cover, you know, Scott Adkins is awesome, so it caught a little bit of my attention, but I was still skeptical. I thought it was going to be derivative, because it doesn't matter who you have on camera. If the script just sucks, it sucks. Now here, it starts out, Scott Adkins plays an MMA fighter named Wes Baylor. Wes the Jailer Baylor. And he's fighting his friend in an MMA fight. And, you know, they talk a bunch of junk to each other. I'm trying not to curse. They talk a bunch of smack to each other at the pre-fight weigh-in, you know, to help build up the fight and build up pay-per-view. Get the fans excited, build up the pay-per-view buys, all that stuff. So they start, and then they, you know, they're like, hey, let's really go for it. This is, you know, there's a lot riding on this fight, even though they're friends and they train together. And Wes Baylor, Scott Adkins' character, isn't winning the fight too handily. And anybody that follows MMA, you know, you don't leave it in the hands of the judges. And his corner's like, you got to go for it. You got to go for the knockout and really do it. And he does, and he unleashes like one of Scott Adkins' trademark awesome kicks. And he accidentally kills his friend. I'm not really spoiling anything. This has the beginning of the movie. And so Wes goes on a downward spiral after that. And, you know, he's just in Thailand, drinking, fighting in little pits, you know, hoping he loses part of him. He just fights, and he's kind of on this road of self-punishment, you know, for what he did, because he feels so terrible for what he did. And he writes a letter to the friend he fights, his girlfriend, which I'll get to later. You know, he writes a letter to her, like, apologizing, and he feels terrible, and he's just can't get past it. So as he's fighting on top of a skyscraper one night, you know, one of these more underground fights, he's approached by this promoter, played by Robert Knepper. And he's like, instead of fighting for peanuts in these little pits in places, or skyscrapers, or whatever, making $200 and a shot, you know, a shot of alcohol, why don't we get some real money for you? But he doesn't tell him what it is. But he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. You know, I don't care. Let's just see what he has to say. He's like, this is the money I want for whatever you got planned for me. Because the promoter's kind of mysterious. He doesn't say, here's your opponent, this is where we're fighting. But, you know, Wes is on such a destructive path, he really doesn't pick that up. He just kind of goes along. He's like, okay, I'm going to give you the money. So he gets a lot of money, and then he's taken out to middle of Myanmar, basically. And in the jungle, he's like, okay, where's my opponent? And he's like, here they are, and it's lined up of people with weapons, and they shake his hand. He's like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And he realizes he's going to be hunted. And so that's where the action takes place, and he tries to survive. And in his trying to survive, he finds kind of a reason to fight, and finds out that he does want to live, and he wants to find some kind of redemption. And that's explored a little bit here. So I like to see this movie has its own identity. It's very different from the original. And it goes on. There's some good action set pieces. This movie makes the most of its budget. Everything looks very good. It doesn't look too cheap. And so he meets some characters along on this adventure, and there's a lot of different action sequences, a lot of cool stuff. So it actually delivers on an action level. And I enjoyed it for what it was, and I've come to appreciate it more with each viewing. So that's my take on this. Like the video if you like this material. Also, let me know your thoughts on it. Did you like it? Do you think Scott Adkins is a great star right now? Any of those things, let me know. I'd really appreciate it. And take care till next time.